Sometimes the hardest part about having everything is realizing you have no one to share it with. Lorraine Ashby learned this lesson on a Christmas Eve that would change her life forever. At 48, she'd climbed every mountain in the business world, but her luxury home felt emptier each year. Then came an unexpected knock at her door. Standing in the snow was Graham Callahan, a man who'd lost everything, and his daughter Iris holding something small in her hands. It was a wooden ornament Lorraine had donated years ago without thinking twice. But this wasn't just any ornament. It had belonged to her parents. What brought these strangers to her door on Christmas Eve? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Lorraine Ashby stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her mountain estate, watching snowflakes drift through the darkness like lost souls searching for somewhere to land. The house behind her stretched out in all directions, 5,000 square feet of polished marble, designer furniture, and absolute silence. She held a glass of Dom Perignon in one hand, her phone in the other, scrolling through emails that couldn't wait even on Christmas Eve. At 48, Lorraine had become exactly what she'd set out to be: powerful, wealthy, untouchable. As CEO of Cloudbridge Solutions, she'd built a tech empire from nothing, taking the company public 5 years ago and making herself obscenely rich in the process. Forbes had called her the Iron Lady of cloud computing. Business Insider dubbed her the woman who never sleeps. Both were accurate. Both missed the point entirely. The house was a monument to her success. Perched on a ridge outside Aspen, it offered 360-degree views of the Colorado Rockies. The kitchen had appliances she'd never used. The home theater seated 12. She'd never had more than 3 people in it, and that was the installation crew. 6 bedrooms, each decorated by an award-winning designer, each perfectly pristine because no one ever slept in them. She took a sip of champagne. It tasted expensive and empty. Her phone buzzed. Another board member checking in, making sure she'd reviewed the Q4 projections. She had, of course. She'd reviewed them at 4 in the morning, while most of America slept off Christmas parties. The numbers were good, exceptional even. Cloudbridge was positioned for aggressive expansion in the new year. More data centers, more clients, more zeros in her bank account. More of everything except what mattered. Lorraine caught her reflection in the dark window. Severe bob cut, perfectly styled. Designer cashmere sweater, perfectly pressed. Face that betrayed nothing, perfectly controlled. When had she become this person? When had the sharp angles replaced the soft curves? When had ambition calcified into armor? She knew the answer. She just didn't like thinking about it. Ms. Ashby? The voice came from behind her, tentative and kind. Lorraine turned to find Mrs. Kowalski standing in the doorway to the kitchen. Her housekeeper, though Lorraine hated that word, preferred to think of her as household manager, had been with her for 7 years. A Polish woman in her 60s, with gentle eyes and hands that never stopped moving. She was the closest thing Lorraine had to regular human contact. "Yes, Mrs. K? I've prepared the roast you requested for tomorrow. It's in the refrigerator with heating instructions. The house is ready for the holiday." She paused, worrying the edge of her apron. "Will you be needing anything else?" "No, thank you. You should head home before the roads get worse." Mrs. Kowalski nodded but didn't move. "Ms. Ashby, forgive me for saying so, but it's Christmas Eve. You shouldn't be alone." Lorraine managed a smile she didn't feel. "I'm fine, Mrs. K, really. I have work to catch up on, and I prefer the quiet." It wasn't entirely a lie. She did prefer the quiet. She just wasn't sure anymore if that preference was genuine or simply the path of least resistance. Quiet didn't ask questions. Quiet didn't remind her of what she'd sacrificed to get here. After Mrs. Kowalski left, Lorraine wandered through the house like a ghost haunting her own life. She ended up in her study, a room lined with awards, framed magazine covers, and photographs of her shaking hands with senators and tech titans. On the desk sat a leather journal worn at the edges, the binding cracked with age. Her father's journal. She'd found it 3 weeks ago while organizing her personal storage, a task she'd been putting off for years. Box after box of items moved from her childhood home after her mother died, most of it never unpacked, never examined, just stored away like memories she didn't want to confront. Samuel Ashby had been a carpenter, not a contractor or a developer, just a carpenter. He'd worked with his hands his entire life, building cabinets and furniture for people in their small Pennsylvania town. Lorraine's mother had been a school teacher. They'd been happy, she thought. In that simple way, people were happy before happiness required a certain income bracket. Lorraine had been their only child, their great hope. Smart, driven, determined to be more than what their small town offered. She'd gotten a full scholarship to Penn, then an MBA from Wharton. She'd moved to Silicon Valley at 25 and never looked back. Except sometimes late at night she did look back, and what she saw made her want to look away again. She opened the journal, running her fingers over her father's careful handwriting. Page after page of sketches, furniture designs, joinery techniques, notes about wood grain and finishes. He'd been an artist, really, though he would have laughed at the word. To him, it was just work. Just what you did with your hands when you loved the craft. There were other notes, too. Personal observations, thoughts about life, scattered memories. On one page, dated from 15 years ago, Laurie called today. Sounded tired. Says she's working on something big. I told her I was proud of her. I don't know if she believed me. Not sure she hears me anymore when I talk. Lorraine closed the journal quickly, as if the words might burn her fingers. She hadn't been home when her father died. Heart attack at 62, sudden and final. She'd been in Tokyo, negotiating a merger that would make her millions. By the time she got the news and caught a flight back, he'd already been gone 2 days. Her mother had made the arrangements alone. 5 years later, her mother followed him. Cancer, though Lorraine suspected it was more a broken heart that simply took time to manifest. They'd been married 40 years, and her mother had spent the last 5 of them waiting to join him. Lorraine had cleared out the house efficiently, professionally, hired an estate service to sort through decades of accumulated life. Most of it went to donation centers. Furniture, clothes, kitchen items, decades of small treasures that meant everything to 2 people and nothing to their daughter, who was too busy to sit with memory. She wondered now what else she'd donated without looking. What other pieces of her history she'd sent away, because examining them would require her to feel something she'd spent years learning not to feel. The champagne was gone. She refilled her glass, a habit that was becoming less occasional and more routine. Not a problem, she told herself. Successful people drank good wine. It was sophistication, not weakness. Outside, the snow fell harder, piling up on the deck, muffling the world in white silence. Christmas lights twinkled in the valley below. Other people's homes, other people's families, other people's lives that somehow seemed warmer than hers despite all her advantages. Her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't work. It was a reminder she'd set weeks ago. Mom's birthday. She would have been 71. Lorraine stared at the screen until it went dark. Then she heard it, a sound so unexpected in her fortress of solitude that at first she thought she'd imagined it. Someone was knocking on her door. Lorraine set down her glass and moved toward the entrance, her heart beating faster than it should. No one came to this house unannounced. No one came to this house at all, really, except service people and the occasional business associate who needed a private meeting away from the office. Through the frosted glass beside the door, she could make out 2 silhouettes. Her hand hesitated on the handle. She'd read the news stories about home invasions in remote mountain properties. But something about the way they stood there, patient, almost apologetic in their posture, made her curiosity override her caution. She opened the door. The cold hit her first, a sharp breath of winter that made her step back. Then she saw them, a man and a young woman, both dusted with snow, both looking as surprised to be there as she was to see them. The man was in his mid-50s. She guessed, with weathered features that spoke of a life spent outdoors. His jacket was worn but clean, his boots practical rather than fashionable. Silver threaded through his dark hair, and his eyes, kind eyes, tired eyes, met hers with something like embarrassment. The young woman beside him looked to be in her mid-20s. She had her father's eyes, Lorraine could see the resemblance immediately, but softer features, and an expression that managed to be both determined and apologetic at once. She wore a parka that had seen better years and held something carefully in her gloved hands. "Miss Ashby," the man said, his voice rough from cold. "I'm so sorry to bother you on Christmas Eve. My name is Graham Callahan, and this is my daughter. Iris, we wouldn't have come if it wasn't important." Lorraine found herself unable to speak for a moment, caught off guard by the intrusion into her carefully controlled world. "How did you find this address?" "I know someone who works for the county assessor's office," Graham said quickly. "I promise we're not here to cause trouble. We just needed to return something to you." Iris stepped forward slightly, extending her hands. In them was a small object wrapped in cloth. She unwrapped it carefully, revealing a wooden ornament, an angel delicately carved, no more than 4 inches tall. Even in the porch light, Lorraine could see the craftsmanship, the attention to detail in each feather of the wings, each fold of the flowing robe. "I don't understand," Lorraine said. "I bought this at a donation center in Denver about 3 months ago," Graham explained. "I'm a woodworker, or I was, and I recognized the craftsmanship immediately. It's exceptional work. Old-school techniques, the kind you don't see much anymore." He paused, seeming to gather his courage. "I recognize the maker's mark on the base. It's subtle, but it's there. Samuel Ashby. I knew your father, Miss Ashby. Years ago, we were both part of the Colorado Woodworkers Guild. He talked about you." Lorraine felt something twist in her chest. She reached for the ornament, and Iris placed it gently in her palm. It was lighter than she expected, the wood smooth and warm despite the cold. She turned it over and found the tiny mark Graham had mentioned. Her father's initials carved so small you'd miss them if you weren't looking. "I donated boxes of things after my mother died," Lorraine heard herself say. "I didn't look through most of them. I hired people to handle it." The admission tasted bitter. "I don't remember this." "Your father made these angels as gifts," Graham said quietly. "Each one was unique. He told me once that he put a piece of his heart into every one of them. I couldn't keep something like that, knowing it belonged with family. It wouldn't have been right." Lorraine looked up at him, this stranger who'd driven through a snowstorm to return something she hadn't known she'd lost. "You came all this way just to give this back?" "We were in the area," Iris said, though something in her tone suggested that wasn't entirely true. "We've been staying with friends in Glenwood Springs, trying to figure out our next move. When Dad realized who this belonged to, he insisted we find you before Christmas. He said it was important." "Important," Lorraine repeated, the word feeling strange in her mouth. "When was the last time anything had been important beyond quarterly earnings and market share?" She looked at the angel again, really looked at it. The detail was extraordinary, each individual feather carved with precision, the face serene and knowing, the hands folded in a gesture that could have been prayer or blessing. How had her father made something so beautiful? How had she never noticed? "There's an inscription," Graham said, "on the base. I didn't want to presume, but I thought you should know it's there." Lorraine turned the angel over, squinting in the porch light. The letters were tiny, carved with the same precision as everything else. "For Laurie, who will soar, Dad, 1989. She would have been 13, a year before high school, before she'd decided that getting out of their small town was the only thing that mattered. Before she'd started seeing her parents' simple life as something to escape rather than something to cherish. She didn't realize she was crying until a tear fell onto the wooden angel. "Miss Ashby?" Iris's voice was gentle. "Are you okay?" Lorraine wiped her eyes quickly, embarrassed. "I'm fine. Thank you for bringing this. It was kind of you." She started to step back to close the door and process this alone, but something stopped her. Graham was shivering. Not dramatically, but enough that she could see it. His jacket was inadequate for the temperature, and Iris's parka, while warmer, was clearly meant for milder weather. And now that she looked past them, she could see an old sedan in her driveway, its exhaust struggling in the cold, one headlight dimmer than the other. "How long have you been driving?" she asked. "Since this morning," Graham admitted. "We would have been here sooner, but the roads were slow." And to be honest, I kept losing my nerve. Showing up at someone's door on Christmas Eve felt presumptuous. It's getting worse out there, Iris added, glancing at the snow that was now falling in thick, heavy flakes. We should probably head back before the pass closes. Lorraine looked at them, these strangers who'd driven hours through a storm to return a piece of her history she hadn't known she'd thrown away. She thought about her father, whom she'd barely mourned. She thought about her mother, who'd kept this angel safe for years, probably hoping Lorraine would come home and claim it. She thought about the enormous, empty house behind her and the small, full gesture these people had made. "Come inside," she heard herself say. Graham shook his head. "That's not necessary." "We just wanted to return. Please," Lorraine interrupted, surprised by the urgency in her own voice. "It's Christmas Eve and you drove all this way. The least I can do is offer you something warm to drink before you drive back." She paused, then added more softly, "Please, I'd like to hear about my father, about the man you knew." Graham and Iris exchanged a glance, some silent communication passing between them. Finally, Graham nodded. "Just for a few minutes. Then we really should get back on the road." Lorraine stepped aside, holding the door open, the wooden angel still clutched in her hand. As they entered her home, she realized this was the first time in years that anyone had crossed her threshold, for reasons that had nothing to do with business or obligation. It felt like something shifting, like ice beginning to crack. Lorraine led them through the foyer into the expansive living room, acutely aware of how the space must look to them. The vaulted ceilings, the custom furniture, the abstract art that cost more than most people's cars. She saw Graham's eyes widen slightly as he took it in, and something in his expression made her feel ashamed of her wealth for the first time in years. "Please, sit," she said, gesturing to the leather sofa near the fireplace. "I'll make something hot to drink." "I can help," Iris offered, but Lorraine shook her head. "I've got it, just warm up." In the kitchen, Lorraine found herself unsure of what to do. She hadn't made hot chocolate in decades, wasn't even sure she had the ingredients. Mrs. Kowalski kept the pantry stocked, but Lorraine rarely looked at what was there. After some searching, she found cocoa powder, milk, and sugar. Her hands shook slightly as she heated the milk on the stove, a task that should have been simple but felt foreign. When she returned with 3 steaming mugs, Graham and Iris were sitting close together on the sofa, speaking in low voices. They stopped when she entered, and she felt like an intruder in her own home. "Thank you," Graham said, accepting the mug with both hands. "This is very kind." They sat in awkward silence for a moment, the only sound the crackling of the fire and the wind outside. Lorraine perched on the edge of an armchair, the wooden angel still in her lap, unsure how to begin a conversation that didn't involve quarterly projections or market analysis. "You said you knew my father," she finally said, "from the Woodworkers Guild." Graham nodded, his expression softening with memory. "I joined in 1998, just after I started my own shop. Your father was one of the senior members, not because he was old, but because he'd been working with wood since he was a teenager. He had this way of teaching without making you feel stupid, patient, generous with his knowledge." "That sounds like him," Lorraine said quietly, though she realized with shame that she wasn't entirely sure it did. How much had she really known? Her father, how much had she paid attention to before she decided his world was too small for her ambitions? "He talked about you sometimes," Graham continued. "Said you were brilliant, going to change the world. He'd show us pictures, you graduating from college, getting your MBA, starting your first company. He was so proud." The words should have warmed her. Instead, they felt like small cuts. "Did he seem happy when he talked about me?" Graham considered this, his weathered hands wrapped around the mug. "Proud, definitely. Happy for your success. But I always got the sense he missed you. He never said it directly, but there was this look he'd get when someone asked about you, like he was talking about someone he used to know well, but didn't anymore." Lorraine swallowed hard. "I didn't come home much. I was always working, always building something. I thought I had time. That's what we all think, right? That there will be time later. My mother died 2 years ago. Iris said softly. Cancer. She was 53. I thought we had decades left. She glanced at her father. You never think about how fast it goes until it's gone. Graham's expression tightened with old grief. Your mother was sick for 8 months. We knew it was coming, and it still felt sudden. Still felt like we needed more time. I'm sorry, Lorraine said, and meant it. After she died, I couldn't work, Graham continued. Couldn't bring myself to go into the shop. It was our place. We'd built it together, ran it together. Every corner had her in it. So I just locked the door and walked away. He paused, staring into his cocoa. 18 months ago there was a fire. Started in the building next door, spread before the fire department could contain it. Lost everything. 30 years of work. Every tool, every piece I was working on, every memory. Even the chair I'd built for her so she could sit in the shop during her last months. Lorraine felt the weight of his loss like a physical thing. Graham, I'm so sorry. We lost the house 6 months later, Iris added. Insurance didn't cover everything, and Dad was still paying off medical bills. We've been staying with friends, both of us working whatever jobs we can find, trying to save enough to start over. Iris gave up her spot at art school to help me, Graham said, his voice thick with regret. She had a full scholarship to the Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design, was going to study furniture design. Instead, she's working retail and waiting tables because her father couldn't keep himself together. Dad, don't. It's true, honey. You sacrificed your dreams for mine. Lorraine looked at Iris with new understanding. You're a designer? Iris shrugged, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. I was studying to be. Not anymore. Do you have your portfolio with you? I don't really keep one anymore. No point when you're not. She does, Graham interrupted, giving his daughter a meaningful look. In the car. She sketches constantly. Can't help herself. Draws furniture designs on napkins, receipt paper, whatever's handy. I'd like to see it, Lorraine said. If you're willing to share. Something shifted in Iris's expression, hope mixed with vulnerability. Are you sure? I mean, you're probably not interested in... I'm interested, Lorraine said firmly. Please. While Iris went to retrieve her sketchbook from the car, Lorraine turned her attention back to Graham. My father had tools, she said suddenly. I found them a few weeks ago, going through storage. I've been meaning to figure out what to do with them. Graham's eyes widened. His woodworking tools? Everything. Saws, planes, chisels. My mother must have kept them after he died. They're all still in their original cases, perfectly maintained. I didn't know what they were worth, or if anyone would want them. She paused. Would you like to see them? Graham's voice caught. Yes, if it's not too much trouble. They were interrupted by Iris returning, snow dusting her hair, a worn leather portfolio clutched under her arm. She hesitated in the doorway, suddenly shy. Come in, Lorraine said warmly. Show me what you've been working on. Iris settled back on the sofa and opened the portfolio. Inside were dozens of sketches, furniture designs that blended traditional craftsmanship with modern aesthetics. Clean lines, beautiful proportions, thoughtful details. Each piece looked both functional and artistic, the kind of furniture that would become heirlooms. These are extraordinary, Lorraine breathed, turning page after page. Iris, you have real talent. These aren't student exercises. These are professional-level designs. Iris blushed. They're just sketches. I've never actually built any of them. Can't afford the materials, and even if I could, I don't have access to a workshop. Lorraine looked at the sketches, then at Graham, then at the wooden angel still resting on the side table. An idea was forming in her mind, fragile, unexpected, terrifying in its implications. Come with me, she said, standing abruptly. I want to show you something. She led them through the house to the basement door, flipping on lights as they descended. The basement was as immaculate as the rest of the house, organized, climate-controlled, filled with carefully labeled boxes and storage units. She navigated to a corner where several large cases sat stacked against the wall. I haven't opened these since they arrived from my mother's estate, she admitted, kneeling beside the cases. I kept meaning to, but I never found the right time. With Graham's help, she lifted the first case onto a nearby table and unlatched it. Inside, nestled in custom foam, was a complete set of handplanes, each one gleaming, perfectly maintained, the wood handles smooth from years of use. Graham made a sound that was almost a gasp. These are Samuel's. They were my father's, Lorraine confirmed, opening another case to reveal chisels, saws, measuring tools. Graham reached out tentatively, then pulled his hand back. May I? Please. He lifted one of the planes, with the reverence usually reserved for sacred objects, turning it over in his hands, checking the blade, running his thumb along the sole. These are museum quality. Some of them are antiques. This plane has to be 70 years old at least. And they're in perfect condition. He looked at Lorraine with something like wonder. Your mother took care of these? She must have, Lorraine said softly. I had no idea. They opened the remaining cases together, revealing a complete woodworker's toolkit, everything a craftsman would need to create beautiful things. At the bottom of the last case, wrapped in oilcloth, was a folded piece of paper. Lorraine opened it carefully, her mother's handwriting shaky but clear. He wanted you to have these. Maybe someday you'll understand what he was trying to teach you. She read the words twice, 3 times, feeling them settle into her chest like stones. Her mother had known that Lorraine had walked away from more than just a small town, had walked away from the values her father tried to instill, the belief that creating something with your hands mattered as much as creating wealth. I don't deserve these, Lorraine whispered. Graham looked at her, his kind eyes understanding. Maybe not, but your father wanted you to have them anyway. That's what parents do. They give you things you don't deserve, hoping you'll grow into them. Iris touched her father's shoulder gently. Like you, with me. The moment hung there, heavy with unspoken emotion. 3 people in a basement, surrounded by tools that represented legacy and loss, each carrying their own weight of regret and hope. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. The storm was intensifying. They made their way back upstairs, the tools temporarily forgotten in the weight of shared stories. Lorraine felt something shifting inside her. Walls she'd spent years building starting to show cracks. She wasn't sure if she should be alarmed or relieved. Are you hungry? She asked as they reached the living room. I have food, more than one person could possibly need. Graham started to decline, but Iris cut him off. We'd love something, if it's not too much trouble. In the kitchen, Lorraine assembled what felt like the first real meal she'd prepared in years. Nothing fancy. Cheese, crackers, fruit, the roast Mrs. Kowalski had prepared sliced thin and arranged on a platter. She worked quietly, aware of Graham and Iris talking softly at the kitchen island, their easy intimacy with each other a stark contrast to her solitary life. Can I help? Iris asked, appearing at her elbow. I've got it, Lorraine said, then reconsidered. Actually, yes. Could you grab plates from that cabinet? They worked in companionable silence for a moment before Iris spoke again. This house is beautiful. Do you live here alone? I do, Lorraine admitted. It's probably too big for one person, but I like the location. The privacy. Doesn't it get lonely? The question was so direct, so guileless, that Lorraine almost laughed. When was the last time anyone had asked her something so personal? Sometimes, she said carefully. But I'm used to it. My work keeps me busy. What do you do? Iris asked, then immediately looked embarrassed. Sorry, that's probably rude. Dad's always telling me I ask too many questions. It's fine, Lorraine assured her. I run a technology company. Cloud computing services. It's about as exciting as it sounds. Dad says you're really successful. He looked you up after he found the ornament. Lorraine glanced at Graham, who had the grace to look sheepish. I wanted to make sure I was returning it to the right person. I may have fallen down an internet rabbit hole. Forbes lists, business profiles, that kind of thing. I apologize if that feels invasive. It's public information, Lorraine said with a shrug. Part of the job. Though I imagine my Wikipedia page makes me sound more impressive than I feel most days. They settled around the kitchen island with the food, and the conversation flowed more easily than Lorraine would have thought possible. Graham told stories about his years as a woodworker, the custom pieces he'd built, the clients he'd worked with, the satisfaction of creating something that would outlast him. Iris shared memories of growing up in the shop, of doing homework, surrounded by sawdust and the smell of wood oil, of her mother teaching her to sketch designs while her father brought them to life. She was the artist, Graham said softly. I was just the craftsman. Together, we made something special. You're being modest, Iris protested. Your work was art, Dad. Is art. Just because you worked in wood instead of paint doesn't make it less artistic. Lorraine found herself drawn to Iris's portfolio again, studying the sketches with a more critical eye. These designs, have you thought about what it would take to produce them? Materials, cost, market? Iris shook her head. Not really. They're just dreams on paper. I'd never got far enough in school to learn the business side. You could, Lorraine said thoughtfully. With the right support, the right workshop, the right craftsman. She gestured at Graham. These could be real pieces. Custom furniture. There's a huge market for it, especially for work that combines traditional techniques with contemporary design. Graham smiled sadly. That was the plan once upon a time. Build up the business, train Iris, eventually hand it over to her. But that ship sailed when the shop burned down. Did it? Lorraine heard herself ask. Sail, I mean? Both Graham and Iris looked at her with confusion. Lorraine paused, uncertain how to articulate the thought forming in her mind. You lost your shop, but you didn't lose your skills. Iris didn't lose her vision. The tools downstairs are just sitting in boxes. What if it doesn't have to be over? Miss Ashby? Lorraine, please. Lorraine, Graham said carefully. I appreciate the sentiment, but starting over takes more than tools and good intentions. It takes capital, space, time, things I don't have anymore. But what if someone did? The words came out before Lorraine could stop them. Have those things, I mean. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. If you're offering money, Iris started. I'm not, Lorraine interrupted, then reconsidered. Or not exactly. I'm thinking out loud, which my board would tell you is dangerous. She stood, pacing to the window where snow continued to fall in thick curtains. I have resources. More than I need, more than I know what to do with. And I have something else, time. Or I could if I wanted it. I don't understand, Graham said quietly. Lorraine turned back to them, the idea crystallizing even as she spoke. I've spent 25 years building a company I'm not sure I believe in anymore. I'm very good at what I do, but I don't love it. I'm not sure I ever did. I just loved winning. She gestured at the house around them. This is what winning looks like. Empty and cold and perfect. Lorraine, Iris's voice was gentle. What I'm saying, badly, is that maybe we could help each other. You need resources to rebuild. She paused, struggling for honesty. I need something real, something that matters beyond stock prices and market share. Graham shook his head slowly. I can't accept charity. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but my pride won't allow it. It wouldn't be charity, Lorraine insisted. It would be an investment, a partnership. You provide the craftsmanship and knowledge. Iris provides the design vision. I provide the business expertise and capital. We build something together. Why would you do that? Graham asked. You don't know us. We show up at your door on Christmas Eve, and suddenly you want to go into business with us. It was a fair question. Lorraine looked at the wooden angel, still sitting on the side table where she'd placed it. Because you drove through a snowstorm to return something that belonged to my father. Because you saw value in it when I threw it away without looking. Because, her voice caught, because I've spent so many years accumulating things and losing everything that matters. Maybe it's not too late to change that. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. Graham looked at his daughter, some silent communication passing between them. Our car is making a terrible noise, Iris said suddenly. The engine's been struggling since we left Glenwood Springs. I don't think we're driving anywhere tonight. Lorraine felt a surge of relief at the practical interruption. Then stay. I have guest rooms that have never been used. We can talk more in the morning, when we've all had time to think clearly. We couldn't impose, Graham began. You're not imposing, Lorraine said firmly. You're accepting hospitality on Christmas Eve, which is about the least imposing thing possible. Please, let me do this one small thing. Graham studied her face for a long moment, and whatever he saw there must have convinced him. Just for tonight, then we'll figure out where to go from here. Fair enough, Lorraine agreed. She showed them to adjoining guest rooms on the second floor, providing towels and anything else they might need. As she was about to leave, Iris caught her arm. Thank you, she said simply. For the food, the hospitality, all of it. But mostly for listening to our story. For caring about Dad's work. Thank you for bringing back something I didn't know I'd lost, Lorraine replied. Back in her own room, Lorraine sat on the edge of her bed with the wooden angel in her hands. The inscription seemed to glow in the lamplight. For Laurie, who will soar. She'd spent her entire adult life soaring, climbing, achieving, conquering. But she'd never stopped to ask what she was soaring toward, or what she was leaving behind in her ascent. Maybe it was time to find out. Yes, sunlight reflecting off fresh snow and flooding through windows. Lorraine woke earlier than usual, disoriented by the knowledge that she wasn't alone in the house. She lay still for a moment, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of other people moving around, water running, footsteps on hardwood, the soft murmur of voices. When she finally made her way downstairs, she found Graham and Iris in the kitchen, both looking somewhat embarrassed. I hope you don't mind, Iris said quickly. We were just making coffee. We didn't want to wake you, but we also didn't want to just sit in our rooms. Please make yourselves at home, Lorraine said, meaning it. The kitchen smelled like coffee and something else. She realized Graham had found the bread and was making toast. How did you sleep? Better than I have in months, Graham admitted. That bed is something else. I felt guilty about how comfortable it was. Lorraine poured herself coffee and joined them at the island. Through the windows, she could see the driveway buried under at least 8 inches of new snow. I don't think anyone's going anywhere for a while. The plows won't reach up here until late afternoon, at the earliest. She expected Graham to look concerned, but instead he seemed almost relieved. Then I guess we're stuck with each other a bit longer. They fell into an easy rhythm over breakfast. Iris found Lorraine's laptop and pulled up weather reports, while Graham insisted on cooking eggs. Lorraine watched him work, noting how his hands moved with practiced efficiency, how he seemed more at ease with a task than sitting idle. You mentioned last night, Graham said as he plated the eggs, that you have my father's tools in the basement. Would you mind if I looked at them again? I've been thinking about them all night. Of course, Lorraine said. Take whatever time you need. They returned to the basement together, and this time Graham opened each case with deliberate care, examining every tool, testing edges, checking balances. Lorraine watched him transform, the weariness falling away, replaced by something like reverence. These planes are extraordinary, he said, holding one up to the light. See the way the iron is set? Perfect angle. And the sole is dead flat. Your mother must have stored them properly, kept them oiled. This one here, he picked up a smaller plane with an ornate handle. This is a violin maker's plane. Specialized tool. Your father must have done fine detail work. I didn't know that about him, Lorraine admitted. I knew he made furniture, but I didn't understand the level of craftsmanship. Graham set the plane down gently. He was a master. The kind of woodworker who could make joints so tight you couldn't slip a piece of paper between them. I learned more from watching him work for an hour than I did from a year of classes. Will you show me? The question surprised them both. Show you what? How to use them, what they're for. I want to understand what my father did. Graham studied her face, perhaps looking for mockery or condescension. Finding neither, he nodded slowly. If you're serious, I'd be honored. They carried several of the tools upstairs to the garage, a 3-car space that housed only Lorraine's Range Rover and far too much empty space. Graham looked around, assessing. We'd need a workbench, he said, and proper lighting. But the space is good, plenty of room, good ventilation. There's a hardware store in town, Lorraine offered. We could get lumber, build something basic. In this snow, I have four-wheel drive and determination. Something shifted in Graham's expression, surprise giving way to something like respect. You're serious about this? I'm serious about learning. Whether that leads anywhere else, I don't know. But right now, in this moment, I want to understand what my father spent his life doing. They spent the morning turning the garage into a makeshift workshop. The hardware store was open. Small-town businesses didn't close for snow, and they loaded the Range Rover with lumber, clamps, and basic supplies. Back at the house, Graham directed while Lorraine and Iris helped, and slowly a simple workbench took shape. Lorraine hadn't done manual labor in years, and her muscles protested. But there was something deeply satisfying about the work. The smell of fresh-cut wood, the sound of hammer on nail, the tangible progress of creating something real. "Hold this steady," Graham instructed, and Lorraine pressed her weight against a board while he secured it. "Good, just like that." "You're a natural," she laughed. "I don't think anyone's ever called me a natural at anything involving my hands." "Your father would have," Graham said quietly. "He believed anyone could learn craft if they cared enough to try." By early afternoon, they had a functional workspace. Graham selected a piece of scrap lumber and one of Samuel's hand planes, showing Lorraine how to hold it, how to let the tool do the work rather than forcing it. "Gentle pressure," he coached. "Let the blade find the wood. There, you see? You're taking a shaving thin as paper." The curl of wood that came away was translucent, impossibly delicate. Lorraine felt something unlock in her chest, a sense of accomplishment completely divorced from profit margins or market dominance. She'd made this, taken something rough and made it smoother. It was simple, almost primitive, and absolutely beautiful. "How does it feel?" Graham asked. "Like meditation," she said honestly. "Like my brain can finally be quiet." They worked through the afternoon, Graham teaching basic techniques while Iris sketched ideas for more substantial projects. At some point, Mrs. Kowalski arrived, shocked to find the house occupied, and insisted on making a proper dinner. The four of them ate together in the kitchen, conversation flowing easily now, barriers continuing to dissolve. After dinner, while Graham helped Mrs. Kowalski with dishes, despite her protests, Lorraine found herself alone with Iris in the study. "Your father is a remarkable man," Lorraine said. "He is," Iris agreed, "though he doesn't always see it himself. Losing Mom, then the shop, it broke something in him. He's been going through the motions, but he hasn't been present." "Not really," she paused, choosing her words carefully. "Today is the first time since the fire that I've seen him actually light up. The way he was teaching you, he was happy. I'm glad," Lorraine said, meaning it. "Can I ask you something?" Iris's tone turned serious. "Last night you mentioned a partnership. Were you serious or were you just being kind?" Lorraine considered the question. 12 hours ago, the idea had seemed impulsive, even reckless. But watching Graham work, seeing his expertise and passion, feeling her own unexpected connection to the craft, maybe it wasn't so reckless after all. "I was serious," she said finally. "Though I'll admit I'm not entirely sure what form it would take. I just know that what I saw today, your father's skill, your designs, the possibility of creating something meaningful, that matters more to me than anything I've done in the past decade." "Why?" Iris asked. "You have everything. You've built an empire. Why would you want to start over with something as small as woodworking?" Lorraine walked to the bookshelf, pulling down her father's journal. She opened it to a page near the end, showing Iris a sketch of an ornate cabinet with detailed notes about joinery and finishing techniques. "My father wrote something here," she said, pointing to the margin. "He said in him the value of work isn't measured in dollars, but in the meaning it carries. Build things that will be loved, not just used. I spent my whole career building things that are used, necessary, profitable, successful. But not loved. Not really." She closed the journal carefully. "I don't know if I can learn to build things that matter, but I'd like to try. And I'd like to help your father rebuild what he lost. Not out of pity or charity, but because I think we might be able to create something none of us could make alone." Iris was quiet for a long moment. "He'll fight you on accepting help. His pride runs deep, Then we'll frame it differently. Not help, collaboration, partnership. We each bring something the other needs. And what do we bring that you need? Lorraine smiled sadly. Purpose, connection, a reason to wake up that isn't just about winning. The roads cleared by the next morning, but Graham and Iris didn't leave. The excuse was practical. Graham wanted to finish organizing the tools properly, and Iris had found Lorraine's high-speed internet useful for researching furniture markets and design trends. But Lorraine suspected the real reason was simpler. None of them wanted to break the spell of these unexpected days together. On the third morning, Lorraine woke to find Graham already in the garage workshop, a cup of coffee steaming beside him as he carefully sharpened chisels. She watched from the doorway for a moment, not wanting to disturb his concentration. His movements were precise, rhythmic, a meditation of their own. "How long have you been up?" she asked finally. He looked up, startled, then smiled. "Couple hours. Old habit. I always started work before dawn when I had the shop. Something about the quiet morning makes the work feel sacred somehow. May I join you?" "I'd like that." They worked in comfortable silence, Graham teaching her to sharpen tools properly, explaining the importance of angles and the patience required to get an edge truly keen. Lorraine found herself absorbed in the task, her usual morning routine of emails and market reports forgotten. "Your father kept notebooks," Graham said after a while. "Did you find any besides the journal you showed me?" "I found several boxes of his things. I haven't looked through most of them." "Would you mind if I did? I'd like to see his techniques, his thoughts. It would be like learning from him again." The request touched something tender in Lorraine. "Of course. They're in my study. Take whatever time you need." Later that afternoon, she found Graham sitting cross-legged on her study floor, surrounded by opened boxes and spread notebooks. His face was wet with tears. "Graham?" She knelt beside him. "What's wrong?" He held up a piece of paper. A letter, she realized, in her father's handwriting. "I found this tucked in one of his journals. It's addressed to you. He never sent it." Lorraine took the letter with shaking hands. The date at the top was from 8 years ago, a month before her father died. "Dear Laurie," it began, and even seeing her childhood nickname in his careful script made her chest tight. "I visited your office last week. Didn't tell you I was coming. I know you're busy, and I didn't want to interrupt. I stood outside that glass building and watched you through a window. You were in a meeting, standing at the head of a long table, everyone listening to you like you were the most important person in the world. And you are important. You've built something extraordinary. But Laurie, sweetheart, you looked so severe, so hard. Nothing like the girl who used to sit in my workshop and laugh while I taught her to sand with the grain. Nothing like the daughter who believed that making something beautiful with your hands was the greatest joy in the world. I know you think I don't understand your work. You're wrong. I understand ambition and drive. I understand wanting to make your mark. What I don't understand is why making that mark requires losing yourself in the process. I'm proud of you. I need you to know that. I'm proud of your intelligence, your determination, your success, but I'm also worried. I'm worried that you've forgotten what matters, that you're so focused on climbing, you've forgotten to look at the view. I hope you figure it out before it's too late, Laurie. I hope you find your way back to the things that feed your soul instead of just your bank account. I hope you remember that success that costs you your humanity isn't success at all. I love you. I'm proud of you. I miss you. I miss who you were. When you believed making something beautiful was enough. Come home sometime, not for me, for yourself. Remember where you came from before you go too far down a road you can't come back from. Love always, Dad. Lorraine read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Graham sat quietly beside her, offering silent support through his presence. "He saw it," she whispered finally. "He saw what I was becoming, and he tried to warn me." "He loved you," Graham said gently. "That's what this letter is. Love. He died a month after writing this. I was in Singapore on a business trip. I didn't make it back in time." She looked at Graham, needing him to understand. "I chose a board meeting over getting on a plane immediately. I thought I had a few more days. I thought work couldn't wait." "Lorraine," He knew. He knew I'd lost myself, and he tried to reach me, and I was too busy climbing to listen. The words came out between sobs now. What kind of person does that make me? Graham's hand found hers. A human one, a flawed one, the kind who gets a second chance if they're brave enough to take it. They sat together on the floor, surrounded by her father's notebooks and tools and unspoken wisdom. Iris found them there eventually, took one look at the scene, and simply sat down on Lorraine's other side. No words, just presence. After a while, Lorraine wiped her eyes and looked at the notebooks scattered around them. What else did you find? Graham picked up one of the leather-bound books. Plans, dozens of them. Furniture designs, architectural details, decorative pieces. Your father had an incredible mind. He could visualize complex joinery before he cut a single piece of wood. Show me. They spent the rest of the afternoon going through Samuel's work, years of accumulated knowledge, sketches, notes, refinements. Lorraine began to understand not just what her father did, but how he thought. Every design had a purpose beyond aesthetics. Every joint was chosen for strength and beauty. Every piece was meant to last generations. This is what I wanted to do, Iris said softly, looking at a particularly intricate design for a corner cabinet. Blend traditional craftsmanship with modern needs. Create pieces that honor the past while serving the present. You still can, Lorraine said. You both can. Graham shook his head. Lorraine, I appreciate everything you've done these past few days, but Iris and I can't stay here forever, living in your guest rooms and playing with your father's tools. We need to face reality. Then let's face it together, Lorraine said firmly. She stood, brushing dust from her jeans. When was the last time she'd worn jeans? And made a decision. I want to show you both something. Will you take a drive with me? Where? Iris asked. 30 minutes from here, something I inherited from my mother that I've never bothered to investigate. They piled into the Range Rover, following directions from a property deed Lorraine had found in her mother's papers. The address led them down increasingly rural roads until they turned onto a private drive, marked only by a rusted mailbox. At the end of the drive sat an old barn, weathered but standing, with good bones and solid construction. The property. Around it was overgrown but level, with mountain views that took Lorraine's breath away. What is this place? Graham asked as they climbed out of the vehicle. According to the deed, my parents bought this land in 1995. I have no idea why or what they plan to do with it. The barn was already here, probably dates back 70 years or more. They walked around the structure, Graham's professional eye assessing every beam and joint. The roof needed work, and the siding showed its age, but the frame was solid oak, built by someone who knew what they were doing. This could be a workshop, Graham said quietly, almost to himself. With some renovation, some investment, this could be an incredible space. Lorraine turned to face them both, her heart pounding with a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. Then let's make it one. Lorraine, Graham began. I'm not offering charity, she interrupted. I'm offering partnership, real partnership. You bring your expertise and craftsmanship. Iris brings design vision. I bring business acumen and capital. We renovate this barn together, build a legitimate workshop, create a real business. Why would you do this? Iris asked. Lorraine looked at the barn, at the mountains beyond, at these two people who'd stumbled into her life, carrying a wooden angel and given her something she didn't know she needed. Because my father tried to tell me something important, and I didn't listen until it was too late. Because I've spent 15 years building an empire that means nothing. Because, her voice caught, because I want to build something that would make him proud. Something real. Something that matters. Graham was silent for a long time, studying the barn, the land, Lorraine's face. If we did this, and that's a big if, it would be equal partnership. Not you funding us, but all three of us investing what we have. My skills, Iris's designs, your business knowledge. Equal stake, equal say. Agreed, Lorraine said without hesitation. And if it fails, Then it fails, Lorraine interrupted, but at least we'll have tried to build something meaningful instead of just surviving. Iris looked at her father. Dad? Graham turned slowly, taking in the whole property. The barn, the land, the possibilities. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. Your mother would have loved this place. She would have, Iris agreed softly. He nodded once. Decision made. Then let's do it. Let's build something. The week between Christmas and New Year's became a blur of activity. Lorraine took an extended leave from Cloudbridge, citing personal matters. The first time in 15 years she'd stepped away without a specific business reason. Her CFO called twice daily, concerned and confused. Her board sent emails ranging from supportive to borderline accusatory. She ignored most of them. Instead, she spent her days at the barn property with Graham and Iris, meeting with contractors, planning renovations, sketching out floor plans on graph paper spread across the hood of her Range Rover. Graham knew every local tradesman, and they came out of respect for his reputation, despite his recent hardships. Word spread quickly in the small mountain community. Graham Callahan was building again. The structural inspection came back better than expected. The barn needed a new roof and modern electrical, but the bones were sound. With insulation and proper finishing, it could be transformed into a world-class workshop. 8 weeks, the contractor estimated. Maybe 10 if we hit weather delays, but she'll be beautiful when we're done. Lorraine wrote the first check without hesitation. Watching Graham's face as he saw the deposit receipt, enough to cover initial renovations, she understood something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't about money. It was about belief, about choosing to invest in something beyond quarterly returns. But as January arrived and work began in earnest, complications emerged. Cloudbridge's board demanded Lorraine's return. A major expansion deal was on the table. European data centers, aggressive growth projections, exactly the kind of opportunity she would have killed for a month ago. Her presence was required. Her signature was essential. "They're not wrong," she told Graham one evening as they sat in her study, reviewing business plans Iris had drafted. "I built that company. I owe them something." "You don't owe them your life," Graham said quietly. "Don't I? They trusted me with their investments. The employees depend on the company for their livelihoods. I can't just walk away because I had an epiphany over Christmas." "Can't you?" Graham set down his coffee mug, his expression serious. "Lorraine, I'm going to tell you something and you need to hear it. When my wife died, I thought I owed it to her memory to keep working, to keep the shop running, to prove that her death hadn't broken me. So I pushed through the grief, pretended I was fine, worked longer hours to avoid going home to an empty house." He paused, his voice dropping. 6 months later, I had a panic attack in the middle of finishing a cabinet. Full-blown breakdown. Couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't function. I locked the shop and never went back. 2 months after that, the fire happened. Graham, my point is this: you can't outrun yourself. You can't work your way past the realization that you're on the wrong path. Eventually, something breaks. Better to choose the break on your own terms than to wait for it to choose you. His words sat heavy in the room. Lorraine thought about her father's letter, about standing in that Singapore hotel room, hearing her mother's voicemail saying Dad was gone, about all the times she'd told herself later there would be time later for family, for reflection, for life outside the office. Later never came. It just turned into regret. "I don't know if I can do it," she admitted. "Walk away from everything I built." "Then don't walk away. Run." Graham's smile was sad but knowing. "Run towards something that matters before you forget what mattering feels like." The next morning, Lorraine drove to Denver for an emergency board meeting. The room was exactly as she remembered. Glass walls, leather chairs, faces that measured worth in shareholder value. She sat at the head of the table, her usual position, and felt like a stranger in her own company. "Lorraine, thank you for coming in." Harrison Ford, no relation to the actor, always his opening joke, the board chairman began. "We need to discuss the European expansion. The deal closes in 3 weeks, and we need you leading the negotiations." She listened to the presentation, watched the projected growth curves. heard the enthusiasm in voices discussing market penetration and competitive advantage. It was everything she'd worked toward: global dominance, unprecedented scale, her name in the history books as one of tech's great empire builders. And she felt nothing. "I need to tell you something," she said when they finished. "I'm resigning." The silence was immediate and absolute. "You're what?" Harrison's face went pale. "Resigning as CEO, effective immediately. I'll help with transition for 60 days, but I'm done." "Lorraine, if this is about compensation," another board member started. "It's not about money." She stood, surprised by how calm she felt. "It's about the fact that I've spent 15 years building something I don't believe in anymore. You need a CEO who wants to conquer Europe, who lives for quarterly growth, who measures success in market share. That's not me. Not anymore. What are you going to do?" Harrison asked, still stunned. "Build furniture." The word sounded absurd, spoken in that room, but Lorraine smiled anyway. "I'm going to build furniture with people who matter, in a barn that belonged to my parents, using tools my father left me. And I'm going to remember what it feels like to create something beautiful instead of just profitable." She left the paperwork on the table. Formal resignation, transition plan, recommendations for her successor. Walking out of that building for the last time, she felt lighter than she had in years, free. But freedom, she discovered, came with complications. That afternoon, sitting in her parked car outside a coffee shop, she called Iris. "I did it," she said when Iris answered. "I resigned." "Lorraine, are you okay?" "I'm terrified, exhilarated, maybe a little nauseous." "Is your dad around?" "He's at the barn with the electricians." "Want me to get him?" "No, actually, I want to talk to you. About the business plan you've been working on." She could hear papers shuffling through the phone. "What about it?" "I've been thinking about it all wrong," Lorraine said. "We've been planning a small operation, custom pieces, local clients, sustainable growth. But what if we thought bigger?" "How much bigger?" "What if we created a cooperative? Not just your dad building pieces, but training other craftsmen, teaching traditional techniques to a new generation. We could have apprenticeships, workshops, a gallery space. Your designs could be the foundation, but we could feature work from multiple artisans." Iris was quiet for a moment. "That's ambitious. I just walked away from a multi-billion-dollar company. I'm feeling ambitious." Lorraine laughed, surprising herself. "But more than that, I keep thinking about what my father wrote. About creating things that matter. What if we created not just furniture, but opportunity? A place where craftsmanship is valued, where people can learn trades that connect them to something real." "Dad would love that," Iris said softly. "Teaching was always his favorite part of the guild meetings. He used to say passing on knowledge was more important than any individual piece." "Then let's do it. Let's build something bigger than any of us imagined." They talked for another hour, Iris's excitement building as they refined the vision. By the time Lorraine hung up, she had pages of notes and a sense of purpose that felt completely foreign and absolutely right. She drove back to the mountain as evening fell, eager to share the expanded vision with Graham. But when she arrived at her house, she found him sitting on her front steps, Iris beside him, both looking shaken. "What's wrong?" Lorraine asked, alarm rising. Graham held up his phone. "I got a call from my landlord, the friend we've been staying with in Glenwood Springs. He sold his property. We have 2 weeks to find somewhere else." "That's not all," Iris added quietly. "I got a call too, from the art school. They're offering me a full scholarship again. Someone dropped out, and there's an opening. But I have to decide by tomorrow, and it's residential. I'd have to move to Denver, be there full time." Lorraine sat down on the steps beside them, understanding the weight of what they were saying. Everything they'd been planning, the partnership, the workshop, the future, suddenly complicated by logistics and opportunity. "Iris, that's wonderful," she said carefully. "You should take it. But the business will still be here. We'll need your designs, your vision. You can work remotely, come up on weekends. We'll make it work." "And what about me?" Graham asked, his voice tight. "I have nowhere to live, no income until the workshop is operational, and apparently I'm about to lose my daughter to art school again." The words hung in the cold air. Lorraine felt the fragility of their plans, how quickly circumstances could unravel dreams. She thought about her empty house, her guest rooms that had never been used until Graham and Iris arrived. She thought about her father's letter, about choosing meaning over comfort. "Move in here," she said. Both of them stared at her. "I'm serious. I have 6 bedrooms, 5 of which are completely unused. The house is 10 minutes from the barn site. You wouldn't pay rent. Consider it part of our partnership. You'd be investing your time and expertise in renovations while living here. It makes practical sense." "Lorraine, we can't," Graham began. "Why not? Because it's unusual? Because it doesn't fit conventional business arrangements?" She looked at both of them. "Nothing about this situation is conventional. We're 3 people who met by accident on Christmas Eve, building a furniture business in a barn based on my dead father's tools. If we're going to do this, let's actually do it. Messy, unconventional, real." Iris looked at her father. "Dad?" Graham ran his hand through his hair, clearly struggling. "It feels like accepting charity." "It's accepting practicality," Lorraine countered. "You need a place to live. I have space I don't use. The barn needs daily oversight during renovation. You can provide that." Meanwhile, Iris goes to school, continues contributing designs remotely, and we build something together. All 3 of us, just at different distances. "What do people say?" Graham asked. "About a man my age moving into your house?" "I don't care what people say," Lorraine said honestly. "Do you?" The question sat between them. Finally, Graham smiled, a real smile, tired but genuine. "I used to care a lot about what people thought. Then I lost everything and realized opinions don't keep you warm at night. Family does. Real connection does. Is that what we are?" Iris asked quietly. "Family?" Lorraine felt tears prick her eyes. "I think we might be. The kind you choose instead of the kind you're born into." They sat together on the steps as stars emerged overhead, 3 people bound by circumstance and choice, building something none of them had planned, but all of them needed. "Okay," Graham said finally. "I'll move in temporarily until we figure out something more permanent." "I'll take the scholarship," Iris added. "But I'm coming home every weekend. And by home, I mean," she gestured at the house. "If that's okay?" "It's more than okay," Lorraine said. "It's perfect." The transition happened faster than any of them expected. Within a week, Graham had moved his few possessions, 2 suitcases and 3 boxes, into the guest room he'd occupied over Christmas. Iris packed for Denver, her car loaded with art supplies and the excitement of reclaimed dreams. Lorraine found herself navigating a reality she'd never imagined, sharing her space, her life, her morning coffee routine with someone else. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. Graham proved to be an easy housemate. He woke early, made coffee quietly, and spent mornings at the barn site supervising renovations. Evenings, he'd return covered in sawdust, apologetic about tracking in dirt, always offering to cook dinner as payment for his room. Lorraine insisted no payment was needed, but she wouldn't refuse his cooking. It turned out Graham had skills in the kitchen that matched his woodworking expertise. "My wife taught me," he explained one evening, chopping vegetables with the same precision he applied to wood. "She said a man who could build a cabinet but couldn't make a decent meal was only half-educated." They fell into rhythms. Dinners together, talking about the day's progress. Evenings in the study, working on business plans while snow fell outside. Weekends when Iris came home, the house filling with her energy and laughter, design sketches spreading across every surface. Mrs. Kowalski adjusted to the changes with surprising grace. "It's good to see life in this house," she told Lorraine one afternoon. "It's what it was built for, people, not just perfection." The barn transformation progressed steadily. New roof, modern electrical, proper insulation. The space was taking shape, raw potential becoming reality. Graham spent hours there, consulting with contractors, making decisions about layout and workflow. Lorraine watched him come alive in ways she'd never seen. This was his element, his expertise, his passion made tangible. But as January moved toward February, real challenges emerged. Cloudbridge was struggling with her departure. The acting CEO made decisions Graham would have opposed, and board members called asking her to reconsider. Her inbox filled with messages from colleagues, employees, investors, some supportive, many confused, a few angry. "You built this company," her former CFO said during one particularly difficult call. "How can you just walk away?" "Because I built it at the cost of everything else," Lorraine answered. "And I'm choosing to build differently now." Money became a conversation they could no longer avoid. The barn renovations were expensive, more than initial estimates. Lorraine covered costs without hesitation, but Graham grew increasingly uncomfortable with the financial imbalance. "We need to formalize this," he said one evening, spreading papers across the dining table. "Actual partnership documents, legal structure. You're investing significant capital. I'm investing labor and expertise. We need to establish fair equity distribution." "I don't care about equity," Lorraine protested. "I do." Graham's voice was firm. "Because if this is going to work, truly work, it has to be built on something solid. Not guilt, not charity, not one person carrying everyone else. Equal partnership means equal stake in success or failure." They spent a week working with lawyers, drafting documents that formalized what had begun as impulse. Callahan and Ashby Woodworks became a legal entity. Graham owned 40%, Iris 20%, Lorraine 40%. Profit sharing, decision-making authority, dispute resolution, all codified, all clear. Signing the papers felt momentous. They were no longer playing at business. This was real. To partnerships built on faith. Lorraine toasted that night with champagne she'd been saving for some unnamed future celebration. "To second chances," Graham added. "To family," Iris said from her laptop screen. She joined the signing via video call from Denver. "The kind we choose." But choosing family, Lorraine discovered, meant accepting its complications. In mid-February, Iris called with news that shifted everything. "I've been offered an internship," she said, her voice tight with conflicting emotions. "With a major furniture design firm in New York. 3 months, good pay, incredible opportunity. But it's full-time and it starts in April." "Iris, that's amazing," Lorraine said, even as her heart sank. "It means I'd miss the workshop opening, miss the first builds, miss everything we've been planning." Graham, listening on speaker, was quiet for a long moment. "You have to take it, Dad. I'm serious, honey. This is your career, your future. The workshop will still be here when you get back. But the business plan, my designs are central to—" "Your designs are extraordinary, and we'll use them," Lorraine interrupted gently. "But Graham's right. This opportunity won't come again. We'll manage. We'll adapt. And you'll come back with even more knowledge and contacts." The call ended with Iris still uncertain, but Lorraine could see Graham's struggle. His daughter was leaving again, pursuing dreams that took her away from him. It was the right thing, the necessary thing, but it cost him. "She's allowed to live her own life," he said quietly after they hung up. "I know that, but it doesn't make it easier to watch her go. She's not leaving you. She's growing. There's a difference." "I know." He stood pacing to the window. "When her mother died, Iris put everything on hold to take care of me. Her education, her dreams, her own grief, all set aside because I was falling apart. And then the fire happened, and she sacrificed even more. I want her to be free of that burden. But I also—" His voice cracked. "I'm terrified of being alone again." Lorraine crossed to stand beside him. "You're not alone. I'm here. This is real, what we're building together. It doesn't disappear because Iris takes an internship." He looked at her, something shifting in his expression. "Why are you doing this, Lorraine? Really? You could have written me a check and felt charitable. Instead, you've turned your entire life upside down. Why?" The question deserved honesty. "Because meeting you and Iris that night showed me what I'd become. Someone who'd traded everything meaningful for success I didn't even want anymore. You brought me my father's ornament, but you really brought me a mirror. And I didn't like what I saw reflected. That's not enough reason to change your whole life, isn't it? What's a life worth if you're not living it for something that matters?" She gestured at the house around them. "I had all of this. I was miserable. Now I have less in some ways, less prestige, less power, less certainty about the future. But I have more of what counts: purpose, connection, the possibility of building something that will outlast me. Graham was quiet, processing. Then I'm afraid too, of failing, of letting you down, of proving that I can't actually do this anymore. Then we'll be afraid together, Lorraine said simply, and we'll do it anyway. The next week brought their biggest challenge yet. A major client, a Denver hotel group, reached out, interested in commissioning custom furniture for a new mountain resort. 20 guest rooms, a lobby, a restaurant, easily $200,000 in work if they could deliver in 4 months. It was exactly the kind of project that could launch the business into viability. It was also impossible with their current setup. The workshop wouldn't be fully operational for another month, and it was just Graham. One man couldn't build furniture for an entire resort on that timeline. We'd need a team, Graham said, studying the project specs. At least 3 experienced woodworkers, maybe 4. And we'd need them now, not in a month. Can you find them? Lorraine asked. Maybe. The old guild network. There are craftsmen I know, people I've worked with. But hiring them requires capital we don't have yet. And there's no guarantee they'd take the risk on a startup operation. Lorraine pulled out her laptop, accessing her investment accounts. How much capital? Lorraine, no. We can't keep spending your money. It's not my money anymore. It's our money. The partnership's money. And this is what investments are for. Calculated risks with high potential returns. She turned the screen to show him the numbers. I can cover operating expenses for 6 months. Salaries, materials, everything. But you'd need to recruit the team and convince them we're legitimate. Graham stared at the figures, clearly overwhelmed. This is insane. Probably, Lorraine agreed. But so is everything else we've done. At least this insanity has a business plan. He laughed, shaking his head. My wife would have loved you. She always said the best decisions felt crazy until they worked. Then let's make it work. Graham spent the next 2 weeks reaching out to old contacts, calling in favors, pitching the vision. 3 woodworkers agreed to join, veterans of the trade who'd been struggling to find meaningful work in an increasingly automated industry. They wanted what Graham wanted, to build things that mattered, using skills that were becoming extinct. The team assembled in early March, meeting at the nearly completed workshop. Lorraine watched Graham introduce them to the space, explaining the vision, showing them Samuel's tools and techniques. He was transformed, confident, authoritative, fully himself in ways she'd never seen. This was who he was meant to be, not just a craftsman, but a leader, a teacher, someone who could build not just furniture but community. As the team began planning the hotel project, Iris came home for a weekend visit. She'd been accepted to the New York internship and would leave in 3 weeks. Her designs for the hotel furniture were elegant and practical, exactly what the client wanted. You're going to be amazing in New York, Lorraine told her Saturday evening as they reviewed final sketches. I'm going to miss this, Iris said quietly. Being here, watching the business start, being part of the team. You're always part of the team. Distance doesn't change that. I know. But it feels like I'm abandoning you and Dad, right when things are getting real. Lorraine set down her pencil, giving Iris her full attention. Let me tell you something I learned too late. My father wanted me to succeed. He was proud of my achievements. But I think what he really wanted was for me to be happy, to find fulfillment, not just accomplishment. She gestured at the sketches. This internship, it's your path, your dream. Your father knows that. He wants you to have what he and your mother built together, a life of meaning and passion. Don't sacrifice that out of guilt. Iris's eyes filled with tears. What if he needs me? He does need you, but not to protect him. He needs you to soar so he can remember what that looks like. March 20th arrived with clear skies and nervous energy. The workshop was complete, walls finished, equipment installed, tools organized on custom-built racks that Graham had designed himself. The team of craftsmen stood ready, Kylo staged, plans reviewed. Today, they would begin work on their first major commission, the hotel furniture that would either establish their reputation or prove the skeptics right. Lorraine arrived at the barn early, carrying coffee and pastries for the team. She'd spent the night barely sleeping, running numbers and contingencies, her business mind unable to fully quiet despite her best intentions. This project represented everything: validation of their vision, financial stability for the business, proof that craft still mattered in a world of mass production. Graham was already there, of course. He stood in the center of the workshop, slowly turning in a circle, taking it all in. The morning light streamed through new windows, illuminating workbenches and tools and possibility.
"How are you feeling?"
Lorraine asked, handing him coffee. Terrified, he admitted. It's been 18 months since I built anything significant. What if I've lost it? What if my hands don't remember? Your hands remember, she said with certainty she didn't entirely feel. I've watched you work. This is who you are. The team arrived shortly after. Marcus, a 60-year-old master craftsman who'd worked with Graham 20 years ago. Devon, younger at 45, but with exceptional skill in joinery. And Juliet, the only woman among them whose finishing work was legendary in woodworking circles. They moved through the space with quiet reverence, examining tools, testing equipment, claiming workstations. This is a real workshop, Marcus said, running his hand over a workbench. Thought those days were gone. They were, Graham replied. We're bringing them back. At 8 o'clock they began. The first piece was a bedside table, walnut with maple inlays, based on Iris's design. Simple enough to build, complex enough to showcase skill. Graham demonstrated the joinery technique, his hands steady despite his anxiety, explaining each step with the patience of a born teacher. Lorraine watched from the doorway, staying out of the way but unable to leave. This moment felt pivotal, not just for the business, but for Graham. For all of them, the first cut was perfect. The wood grain aligned exactly as planned. Graham's shoulders relaxed incrementally. "Still got it, old man," Devon called out, grinning. "We'll see," Graham replied, but he was smiling. They worked through the morning, falling into rhythms as old as the craft itself. The workshop filled with sounds Lorraine was learning to recognize: the whisper of hand planes, the precise tap of mallets, the quiet conversations about grain direction and glue-up timing. It sounded like music, purposeful and ancient. By noon, the basic frame of the bedside table was complete. The team gathered around to examine Graham's work, offering observations and approval. The joinery was flawless. Invisible seams, perfect angles, the kind of craftsmanship that would last generations. "Just like old times," Marcus said, clapping Graham on the shoulder. But Lorraine could see the emotion in Graham's face. This wasn't just like old times. This was better, rebuilt from nothing, infused with new purpose, created from the ashes of loss. After lunch, they began production in earnest. 4 craftsmen working on 4 tables simultaneously, Graham rotating between stations to teach, adjust, encourage. Lorraine handled logistics, fielding client calls, managing material deliveries, updating schedules. They worked as a unit, each person's expertise complementing the others. Around 3 o'clock, a car pulled up outside. Lorraine glanced out to see a well-dressed woman stepping out, Mrs. Kensington, the Denver client who'd commissioned the hotel furniture. Her visit wasn't scheduled. "Graham," Lorraine called softly. "We have a visitor." He looked up, saw the client, and his expression tightened. "Early inspection?" Apparently. They met Mrs. Kensington at the door. She was in her 60s, elegant and discerning, with the kind of critical eye that missed nothing. "Miss Ashby, Mr. Callahan," she greeted them. "I apologize for the unannounced visit. I was in the area and wanted to see the operation firsthand. The hotel board has been asking questions, and I thought—" She paused, looking past them into the workshop. "May I?" "Of course," Graham said, though Lorraine could hear the tension in his voice. They led her inside. Mrs. Kensington walked slowly through the space, examining works in progress, running her fingers along completed joints, asking technical questions that revealed genuine knowledge. The team continued working, though Lorraine noticed everyone's movements became slightly more self-conscious. At the completed bedside table, Mrs. Kensington stopped. She studied it from every angle, opened the drawer to check the slides, tested the stability. The silence stretched uncomfortably. "This is exceptional," she finally said. Better than the samples you showed me. Much better, she turned to Graham. Where did you learn to work like this? A lifetime of practice, he replied, and teachers who cared about passing on real skill. It shows. She examined the other tables in progress. These will be heirlooms, pieces people will keep for 50 years, passed down to children. That's what I wanted, furniture with soul, not just function. That's what we build, Graham said simply. Mrs. Kensington pulled out her phone, took several photos. The hotel board will want to see this. But I need to ask, can you maintain this quality across 20 rooms? This isn't just one table. It's beds, dressers, desks, nightstands, hundreds of pieces, all to this standard. The question hung in the air. It was the fear they'd all been carrying. Could they scale craftsmanship? Could they build enough, fast enough, without compromising quality? Graham looked at his team, at the workshop they'd built together, at Lorraine standing beside him. Yes, he said with quiet confidence, we can. It won't be fast, but it will be right. That's the promise we're making, every piece built like it matters, because it does. Mrs. Kensington studied his face, perhaps looking for doubt or hesitation. Finding neither, she nodded. Good, because I'm adding 6 more rooms to the order. The hotel board loved your initial work. They want the full treatment, 30 rooms total plus lobby pieces. Lorraine's breath caught. 30 rooms meant nearly $300,000 in revenue, enough to establish the business, hire more craftsmen, invest in growth. Everything they'd hoped for, suddenly real. We'll need an adjusted timeline, she managed to say. For the expanded scope. Understood. Shall we say 6 months instead of 4? 6 months works, Graham confirmed, his voice steady, despite the magnitude of what they'd just been offered. After Mrs. Kensington left, the team erupted in celebration. Handshakes, backslaps, Devon letting out a whoop that echoed off the rafters. But Graham stood quietly, looking at the bedside table that had proven they could do this. Lorraine approached him carefully. You okay? I'm terrified, he admitted, and grateful, and completely overwhelmed. He turned to her, eyes bright with unshed tears. We're really doing this. We really are. I couldn't have done this without you. Without everything you risked. You would have found a way, Lorraine said. You just needed the chance. I just helped provide it. He shook his head. You provided more than chance. You provided belief when I had none left. The celebration at the workshop lasted another hour before reality reasserted itself. 30 rooms meant triple the workload, tighter deadlines, and coordination challenges that made Lorraine's corporate project management experience suddenly relevant again. But as she drove home that evening, Graham in the passenger seat, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years, pure, uncomplicated joy. We need to call Iris, Graham said, pulling out his phone. She needs to hear this. They reached her on the 3rd ring, her voice bright with the energy of someone living their dream. Dad, Lorraine! What's up? We got the contract, Graham said, unable to contain his grin, and they doubled it. 30 rooms. Iris's squeal came through so loud, Graham had to hold the phone away from his ear. Are you serious? That's incredible. Tell me everything. They recounted the day as Lorraine drove, Graham's excitement spilling over in ways she'd never seen from him. This was what success looked like when it mattered. Not a stock price or a headline, but a father sharing triumph with his daughter, both of them building toward futures they'd thought were lost. I'm so proud of you, Dad, Iris said when he finished. Mom would be too, Graham's voice caught. I wish she could see this. She can, Iris said softly. I believe that. After they hung up, Graham sat quietly for a moment. She leaves for New York in a week. I know. Part of me wants to ask her to stay, to be here for this, to see the business really take off. He shook his head. But that would be selfish. It would be human, Lorraine corrected. You're allowed to miss your daughter. I know. But I also know she needs to fly. Just like you told her, she needs to soar. He looked at Lorraine. Your father was wise. He understood what I'm only learning now, that loving someone means letting them become who they're meant to be, even when it takes them away from you. They arrived home to find Mrs. Kowalski had left dinner, warming in the oven, and a note congratulating. Them on the contract, news apparently travelled fast in their small mountain community. They ate together at the kitchen island, exhausted but content, planning the weeks ahead. "We'll need more storage," Graham said, sketching on a napkin. "And maybe another workbench." Marcus suggested bringing in an apprentice, someone young we can train. "What about living quarters?" Lorraine asked. "If we're training apprentices long-term, they'll need somewhere affordable to stay during their training." Graham looked up, surprised. "You're thinking long-term, aren't you?" "I suppose I am," he smiled. Strange how quickly impossible becomes inevitable. Over the next week, they worked 16-hour days. The team at the workshop building furniture with methodical precision, while Lorraine managed the business side. Contracts, insurance, marketing materials. She discovered she was good at this kind of work too, when it was in service of something meaningful rather than just profitable. Evenings, she and Graham would review progress over dinner, their conversations ranging from joinery techniques to profit margins to Graham's memories of teaching Iris to sketch as a child. Slowly, imperceptibly, the house stopped feeling like Lorraine's space and became their space. Shared territory, common ground. On Iris's last night before leaving for New York, they threw a small dinner party. The workshop team came, bringing wives and partners. Mrs. Kowalski cooked a feast. The house filled with laughter and stories and the warmth of community Lorraine had spent decades avoiding. After dinner, Graham presented Iris with a gift. A small wooden box he'd been working on secretly, carved with intricate designs that incorporated both his style and her artistic sensibility. "For your jewelry," he said, voice thick with emotion, "or whatever treasures you collect in New York. Something to remind you that home is here when you're ready to come back." Iris held the box like it was made of glass, tears streaming down her face. "It's perfect, Dad, you're perfect." "I'm really not," he said with a soft laugh. "But I'm trying." Later, as guests departed and dishes were cleared, Lorraine found herself alone with Graham on the back deck, watching stars emerge over the mountains. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For giving me back my life. For believing in something I'd stopped believing in myself. For—" he paused, searching for words. "For becoming family when I thought mine was broken beyond repair." Lorraine felt tears prick her eyes. "You gave me something too. Purpose. Connection. A reason to remember who I was before I became who I thought I needed to be." They stood in comfortable silence, the evening cold, but the moment warm. Something had shifted between them over these months. Friendship deepening into something Lorraine couldn't quite name, but felt in her chest like a steady flame. "I'm scared," Graham admitted. "Of Iris leaving. Of the business failing. Of being happy again and having it taken away like everything else." "Me too," Lorraine said. "I walked away from everything familiar. Some days I wake up terrified I've made a catastrophic mistake." "Have you?" She considered the question honestly. "No. This is the first thing I've done in 20 years that feels right. Scary, uncertain, completely outside my control, but right." Graham turned to face her fully. "Lorraine, I need to tell you something. These past months, living here, working together, building this business, it's been more than just partnership for me. You've become—" he struggled, clearly uncomfortable with vulnerability. "You've become essential. To my life, not just my work. And I don't know what to do with that." Lorraine's heart hammered. "I don't know either, but I know I don't want you to leave. I know this house feels empty when you're not in it. I know that somewhere between returning an ornament and building a workshop, we became something neither of us planned. Is that okay?" Graham asked. "Can it be okay?" "I think it has to be," Lorraine said, "because I can't imagine going backward now." He reached for her hand and she took it. They stood like that under the stars, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their separate lives, choosing to build something new together. Inside, Iris watched through the window, smiling through her tears. Some things she thought were worth leaving for, because you trusted they'd still be there when you returned. 6 months later, Lorraine stood in the completed hotel lobby, watching sunlight stream through floor-to-ceiling windows and illuminate the furniture they'd built. Every piece was a masterwork. The reception desk with its flowing grain patterns, the lounge chairs that managed to be both elegant and inviting, the coffee tables that would bear the weight of 1,000 conversations. This was what legacy looked like when built with care rather than speed. "It's perfect," Mrs. Kensington said beside her, running her hand along the desk's polished surface. "Better than I imagined. The board wants to discuss furnishing our other properties. We have hotels in Vale and Telluride." "We'd be honored," Lorraine replied, making mental notes about capacity and timeline. "Let me connect you with Graham to discuss specifics." After Mrs. Kensington left, Lorraine walked through the guest rooms one final time. Each space told a story through its furniture: headboards carved with mountain motifs, dressers with hand-cut dovetails, nightstands that would last generations. Graham's team had poured themselves into this work, and it showed in every detail. Her phone buzzed. "A text from Graham. Iris lands in 2 hours. Meet us at the barn?" She smiled, typing back, "Wouldn't miss it." The drive to the workshop had become so familiar it felt like muscle memory. The barn stood against the mountain backdrop like it had always belonged there, which, in a way, it had. They'd simply given it new purpose, honored what it was while transforming what it could be. Inside, the team was assembling for their weekly meeting. But today felt different, special. Graham had hung a banner, "Welcome home, Iris," and Marcus was arranging pastries on the communal table they'd built together last month. "She doesn't know we're all here," Graham said when Lorraine arrived. "I told her just to meet me at the barn. Ambush by affection," Lorraine said. "I like it." They heard her car first, then footsteps, then Iris burst through the door and stopped dead. "You're all here?" 3 months away required a proper welcome committee, Devon explained, grinning. Iris hugged her father first, long and tight, then made her way around the room, embracing each person. When she reached Lorraine, she whispered, "Thank you for taking care of him." "We took care of each other," Lorraine whispered back. Over coffee and pastries, Iris regaled them with New York stories. The designers she'd worked with, the techniques she'd learned, the contacts she'd made. But what struck Lorraine most was how she kept returning to home, to the workshop, to what they were building here. "The firms in New York are impressive," Iris said. "Cutting-edge design, international clients, all of it. But they're missing something. They've forgotten that furniture should have soul, should connect the maker to the user across time." She looked around the workshop. "What you're doing here matters more than anything I saw there. Does that mean you're staying?" Graham asked, trying to sound casual and failing completely. "It means I'm home," Iris confirmed. "The internship was incredible, but this is where I belong. Where we're building something that will outlast us." The relief on Graham's face was palpable. He'd never asked her to stay, had supported her going, but having her back clearly meant everything. Later, after the team dispersed, the 3 of them sat in the workshop office, a small space Lorraine had insisted they create, complete with Iris's design sketches covering one wall. "The business is sustainable now," Lorraine said, reviewing their accounts on her laptop. "The hotel contracts, plus the custom pieces we've been commissioned for private clients, we're profitable. Actually profitable, not just surviving. We should celebrate," Iris suggested. "We should expand," Graham countered. "Remember the apprenticeship program we discussed? Now we can afford it." They spent an hour planning, not just business strategies, but legacy. How to train the next generation of craftspeople. How to preserve techniques that were disappearing. How to prove that in a world of mass production, craftsmanship still mattered. As evening approached, they locked up the workshop together. Graham paused at the door, looking back at the space they'd created. "You okay?" Lorraine asked. "I'm thinking about the fire," he admitted. "About losing everything and thinking my life was over. If someone had told me then that 18 months later I'd be here doing this with both of you, I wouldn't have believed them. Life is strange that way," Iris said softly. "The worst moments can lead to the best ones if we're brave enough to keep going." They drove back to the house in caravan, Iris following in her car packed with New York belongings she was moving back into her room. The house that had once echoed with emptiness now hummed with life. 3 people building a family from choice rather than blood. That night, after Iris went to bed, Lorraine found Graham in the study, examining her father's journal as he often did, seeking wisdom from a man he'd known briefly, but respected deeply. "I've been thinking," he said when she entered, "about next steps. For us, I mean, not the business." Lorraine's heart quickened. "What about us? We've been dancing around something for months now. Living together, building together, becoming something neither of us quite knows how to name." He closed the journal carefully. "I'm 55 years old, Lorraine. Too old to play games or pretend I don't feel what I feel. These months with you have been the happiest I've been since my wife died. And I hope you feel something similar." "I do," Lorraine said quietly. "I feel more alive than I have in decades. More myself than I've been since I was young enough to believe that love and work and life could all exist in harmony." Graham stood, crossing to where she sat. "Then maybe we stop dancing around it. Maybe we just acknowledge that this thing we've built, it's not just a business or a partnership. It's a life, together." "Together," Lorraine agreed, taking his hand. Through the window, the wooden angel ornament caught lamplight from where it sat on the mantel. Beside it now rested the carved box Graham had made, and between them a framed photo of the 3 of them at the workshop's opening. Family by choice, bound by craft and courage and second chances. Lorraine had spent years soaring toward an idea of success that left her empty. Now standing in this house with this man, building furniture and futures and family, she understood what her father had tried to tell her all along. Some people soar by climbing higher, others soar by finally coming home.